Good morning, everyone. I'm Councillor Ahmed Jawar, the Mayor of Telford and Wrekin, and on behalf of the Council, I would like to welcome you all to this year's Holocaust Memorial Civic Ceremony. I am pleased you are able to join us as this event plays an important part in bringing our communities together to pause and reflect. Holocaust Memorial Day is the International Day on the 27th of January to remember the 6 million Jews murdered during the Holocaust, alongside the millions of other people killed under the Nazi persecution and in subsequent genocide in Cambodia, Rwanda, Bosnia, Darfur, and many more. The Holocaust threatened the fabric of civilization. The genocide must still be resisted every day. Our world often feels fragile and vulnerable, and we cannot be complacent. Even in the UK, prejudice and the language of hatred must be challenged by us all. We meet today at a time when the UK is divided, with many of us experiencing uncertainty, fear and grief. An increasing level of denial, division and misinformation in today's world mean that we must remain vigilant against hatred and identity-based hostility. Yet, we know tens of thousands of people are coming together to mark HMD, to help those in need and to build a better future. Communities are standing in solidarity and experiencing togetherness even while we are apart. Throughout today's ceremony, you will hear more about this year's theme, and I will now hand over to Councillor Paul Watling, who is going to provide more information on being the light in the darkness.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to talk to you about this year's theme for Holocaust Memorial Day, Be the Light in the Darkness. It encourages everyone to reflect on the depths humanity can sink to. But also the ways that individuals and communities resisted that darkness to be the light, before, during and after genocide. Before every genocide, perpetrators divide society into those considered worthy of human treatment and those who are not. Distortions are deployed using propaganda and stereotyping to identify and victimize a specific group or groups, followed by discrimination, often enshrined into law. The darkness leading to genocide also causes deep emotional trauma. For those affected, fear, hopelessness and dread all have a profound and long-lasting impact. And amid the darkness of genocide, there have always been those who have opposed the regime, risking their own lives, homes and communities. Maintaining faith and culture during genocide defies the ambitions of the regimes to eradicate entire groups and their culture. Sadly, hostility and prejudice against people because of their identity continues to harm people, both here in the UK and across the world. This year's theme asks us to recognise that the responsibility for genocide education and prevention does not lie only with survivors sharing their experiences. Their experiences hold lessons for all of us, and it is vital that we listen and become witnesses for them. We can all stand in solidarity. We can choose to be the light in the darkness by our actions at home, in public and online. I urge you all to do so. We're now going to hear from our guest speakers, the first of which is Eve Clevenger.
May I start by thanking all those at Telford and Wrekin Council who have organised this event, and thank all of you who are watching. The 27th of January, and the day in 1945 that the camp of Auschwitz, where unimaginable brutality and inhuman acts were committed, was liberated by Russian forces. I'll describe the reaction to that by a survivor, Eva, only 11 years old at the time, in a moment. The theme of this year's Memorial Day is Be the Light in the Darkness. Can I urge myself to be a light? Can we alone, or even better together, shed light when there is darkness? When we saw the image of George Floyd being murdered in front of a crowd, if we had been there, could we have stepped forward and saved his life? Could I have been the light for George Floyd? My outrage at that event and what was perpetrated that day, the racism, the dehumanization of another person, took me back to the story of my family and how most of them were murdered. Just an ordinary family who happened to be Jewish in the Second World War. There was some glimmer of light in those dark days in the 1930s and 40s after Hitler came to power in Germany. Each year I learned something new and astounding about that period. And I recently attended a meeting, Zoomed meeting, about Josiah Wedgwood, the great-great-grandson of the famous Midlands potter. The young Josiah, after a career in the forces, became an MP for Newcastle-under-Lyme in 1919. The younger Josiah, after that career, became a really independent thinker. He opposed appeasement with Hitler right from the start. He fought against injustice and those that lacked humanity, and worked tirelessly to help European Jews escape to safety. The rules for immigrants then were that they had to have financial guarantees of £50. That would be approximately £2,500 today. He personally guaranteed 200 people to escape to safety, £500,000 in today's money. He was a real light. Do read more about him. But I'll turn my attention now to another story. It's the spring of 1939. A 27-year-old attractive Jewish woman is summoned to see a Gestapo officer at a police station in Czechoslovakia. The Nazis have invaded and the Jewish population is in turmoil of what might happen to them. The dark clouds are descending on the Jews of Czechoslovakia. But this lady actually was not afraid, and she told the officer, "I want to go to England." What was a chance of a Nazi officer granting this lady her wish? And yet he did. She travelled to England and safety a few weeks later. She left behind her brother Ludwig, his wife Gina, and their 4-year-old daughter Rita. She left behind her sister Olga, her husband Kenny, and their son Egon, aged 5. And she left behind the man who planned to marry her. That woman was my mother. She'd been tasked with getting them out. She went to the British authorities in London and pleaded with them for help. But she was faced with that £50 guarantee required for each person. And as a poor refugee with no resources, she just didn't have it. All except her sister's husband were murdered. He, my Uncle Kenny, arrived at the platform at Auschwitz, was chosen to stay alive, while he watched his wife and son Egon, then aged 11, be selected for death. And they were gassed and burnt on the day of arrival. I'm going to end with another story, a sort of light in a very dark time. I've read an account of an Auschwitz survivor who was born in Romania in 1934. In May 1944, she arrived at that platform at Auschwitz, 5 months actually before Egon. They were both 11 years old. Her name was Eva. She was with her parents and 2 older sisters. And the light for her was that she was also with her twin sister, Miriam. An SS guard looking for twins spotted them, and they were dragged away from their family, whom they never would see again. The twins, they were spared the gas chambers, but were tortured in other ways by being experimented on by the infamous Dr. Mengele, which is described in Eva's book, Surviving the Angel of Death, a 3 times weekly visit to the laboratory, where they had blood taken from each arm simultaneously, and they had substances injected into them. Eva was only 11, but her book tells us how she protected her twin and vowed to keep both of them alive, one day at a time. I mentioned the liberation of Auschwitz earlier, and here is how Eva described it in her book, and I quote, "On the morning of January the 27th, the noise stopped." And here she's referring to the sounds of continuous shooting and bombing that had taken place in the previous 2 weeks. The death marches had already left, the Nazis had left, and so had Dr. Mengele, who escaped and eventually found safety in Argentina and died there in 1979. Eva continues, "We hoped this was liberation, but we had no idea what liberation would be like. It was snowing heavily. Sometime late in the afternoon, a woman ran to the front of the barracks and started yelling, 'We are free! We are free!' Free? What did she mean? And then I saw them. Soviet soldiers emerging through the snow. They hugged us, handed us cookies and chocolate. Delicious. It was our first taste of freedom. And I realized that my silent pledge to survive and walk out of the camp alive with Miriam by my side had become a reality." From Eva's book. When I watched footage of the liberation of Auschwitz, I've seen this scene of young children walking out, and in the front are 2 little girls in striped shirts holding hands. And I've always wondered, how all these children managed to survive. Now I know. They were Mengele's twins. And those two in the front, holding hands, are Eva on the left and her twin sister Miriam on the right. After the war, Eva started an organisation called Candles to help survivors of Mengele's experiments. And this year, households across the UK are being invited to light a candle at 8 p.m. on the 27th of January and put it in their window to remember all those that have been murdered, not just Jews of the Holocaust, but gypsies, black people, the disabled, political opponents, as well as those that were killed in other genocides, and to stand against prejudice and hatred. The Uyghur Muslims are being forced into concentration camps at the moment. People continue to face injustice and hatred, and it's up to us to stand up for the oppressed. These last words are those of Josiah Wedgwood during the Second World War. Stand up for the oppressed. And Eva has a message for young people in her book, but I think it's for all people everywhere. Never, ever give up on yourself and your dreams, for everything good in life is possible. Judge people on their actions and their character. And finally, perhaps the hardest and most controversial, forgive your worst enemy and forgive everyone who has hurt you. It will heal your soul and set you free. I wonder if this is the wisdom we need to allow peace to enter into places that look so dark. In our seemingly fractured world, these are thoughts with which I would like to leave you. Thank you for listening.
This Holocaust Memorial Day, as students at Newport Girls High School have reflected on the theme of being the light in the darkness, we have learned about the work of inspirational Holocaust survivors, such as Leon Greenman, who survived incarceration at Birkenau, but had to live with the loss of his wife, Elsie, and son Barney, who were murdered by the Nazis. Leon dedicated his life to sharing his story with young people, speaking in schools on a daily basis, even when he was in his 90s and often ill with bouts of pneumonia, in the hope of inspiring a future free of hatred and prejudice that caused him so much suffering. As part of our learning, we were privileged to study a short poem written by Leon and to write our own responses to his words. Leon's poem echoes Eva's message about forgiveness that Dr. Clevenger spoke of in its opening lines. Revenge does not bring back the dead, does not take away the suffering, it simply perpetuates the violence. Leon rejected a life consumed by a desire for revenge, a negative emotion that inevitably would cause more hatred and suffering. Instead, through his positive actions to build a brighter future, he acted as a beacon of hope, a light in the darkness who inspires us through his actions to consider how we can help to build a more compassionate world.
Our reflections on the theme have also led us to ask questions of ourselves, such as, how do you view the people around you? Are your opinions defined by discrimination? Because despite the message of never again and the inspirational work of genocide survivors such as Leon, right now we live in a divided society with many deep-rooted us and them mentalities. This same mentality constitutes the first stage of genocide, classification. This division is forced onto minority groups both systematically and individually, and this has occurred throughout history until this present day. For example, According to Bernardo's, Afro-Caribbean students are 3.5 times more likely to be excluded than their peers. The Harris poll stated in 2018 that 36% of American youth felt uncomfortable knowing a family member was LGBTQ+, and Scope reported that a third of disabled people feel there is a lot of prejudice against them. These worrying statistics prove that discrimination is a widespread issue, affecting an array of minority groups at varying levels of severity. In a world defined by division, this year for Holocaust Memorial Day, we ask you to be the light in the darkness. Anyone who has faced discrimination will know the relief of having someone assure you you're worth more than the prejudice against your identity, and you can be that person. So please, to make a difference, don't change your opinion on someone because of who they are. Be proud of yourself because of your identity, not in spite of it. And most importantly, don't ignore discrimination, however small. Be a light in the darkness, because not all division ends in genocide, but all genocide starts with division.
Thank you to everyone who joined us today. Our particular thanks go to Paul, Eve, Rebecca and Amy for making this recording so special. Despite the horrors of the Holocaust, we know that genocides have taken place since and continue to do so in the modern world today. The Holocaust prompted the coinage of the legal term genocide, which has come to be used in Cambodia, Rwanda, Bosnia and Darfur. Closer to home, on our streets, on public transport and online, people are still facing attacks because of who they are. Locally, we share a vision of a fair society, free from unlawful discrimination. A society where we can all achieve our potential and as one diverse community, we can live in harmony. Holocaust Memorial Day presents an opportunity when people from all backgrounds can come together to learn from the past and create a better future. It serves as a reminder that all of us not only have the ability to resist the forces of hatred, but we also have a responsibility to do so. I will close this ceremony by sharing the words of Holocaust survivor Gina Tugel MBE, who sadly passed away in 2018. Gina said, "We will continue to do our bit for as long as we can, secure in the knowledge that others will continue to light a candle long after us." Thank you for watching.